Tar Heels and Mountaineers in Kenan Stadium. It's a weird game time. 5:15 kick time between Carolina and Appalachian State. We'll be on the air radio-wise at 4 p.m. for this one. So get a little extended Reed's Jewelers pregame show for this one.
I really think Carolina's going to play well in this game. You've got students on campus. It's not Labor Day weekend where a lot of them leave. This is their first home game of the school year. You've got a great kickoff time that enables you to be part of Chapel Hill during the day and then come out and be under the lights for part of the day also, but it's not too late. So all the people that say they want a night game, except they want it to be a night game that ends early, this is that. It's a night game that ends early.
This is a night game that ends early.
And you've got a team that people are excited about that had a great performance last week, showed some really encouraging signs of things people have been wanting to see from Tar Heel football. They're going to be glad to be back in Kenan. You got an in-state opponent that's going to bring a bunch of fans, which always helps your home crowd because they get fired up that those darn opposing fans are cheering for their team.
Yep.
So I just think it'll be great atmosphere. I think Appalachian will have Carolina's absolute full attention, and I think the Tar Heels are going to really play well. And you've got the added bonus of Drake May probably doesn't feel like he was absolutely fantastic against South Carolina. That's a dangerous Drake May.
It was interesting. I was doing an interview. I do many important interviews throughout the week, Adam.
Sure. Only when you're not in meetings.
Right. Meetings. It's meetings, interviews, private jet campaign. This is just the life.
Voting for awards.
Yeah. Look, a day in the life. And the gentleman asked me a question I talk to this gentleman it's one of our radio affiliates, and during football season, I talk to him every single week, and he is very informed and always asks me good questions. And he asked, Drake May didn't have a great, not his best game last week, and blah, 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 and, do you think he'll come back and be ready to go? And I thought, Drake May was really good last week. Drake May didn't throw for 550 yards and 7 touchdowns because he didn't need to. That wasn't the approach. I do think that, obviously, the 2 interceptions are not what you want. And sneakily, in the last 5 games Carolina's played, Drake May has as many interceptions as he does touchdown passes. I don't think he got a lot of help from his receivers on either one of those interceptions. And that's not to absolve Drake May, but that's my opinion. But Drake May completed 75% of his passes, controlled the game, led his team to 8 of 13 on third down with some big throws on third downs. Carolina turned it over on downs once. A receiver dropped a ball that hit him in the hands. The Tar Heels had to settle for a field goal once in the red zone. A receiver had a ball hit in the hands. That was dropped. No, Drake May did not have the most spectacular statistical game of all time. But I didn't leave that game thinking Drake May didn't have a great game. He had He controlled the action from the quarterback spot in every way possible when the Tar Heels were on the field.
As you said earlier in the week, there won't ever be a time where Drake May is the biggest concern Carolina football has.
Or a concern.
And if that ever does become the case, then the Tar Heels are awesome, and book your CFP hotel reservations because it's happening.
Adam, from the Tar Heel perspective on the field, a couple of things. Now, Adam and I do not know the Tez Walker result as of when we are recording. You might know it at this point. Hopefully, finally, somebody comes to their senses. We've talked about that. The Tar Heels have talked about that. And we'll continue if it's not what we believe to be the right outcome. So his availability, Nate McCollum was unable to go last week due to injury. His availability, will the Tar Heels have those guys? And if so, what do they do for your offense? I mean, again, I understand they're talking about Tez Walker, and they should be. He's awesome. Nate McCollum was the 5th leading receiver in the ACC last year for Georgia Tech, who didn't have Drake May. So you're missing 2 guys there that I think can really bolster your passing attack, not to mention Kobe Paysor and the tight ends and J.J. Jones and Andre Green and Gavin Blackwell and everybody else Carolina has. So are those guys available? And if they are, how do they change Carolina's offense or bolster Carolina's offense? And can the defense stack games in a row? You're likely not going to get 16 tackles for loss and 9 sacks, just because those numbers are crazy. The Tar Heels currently lead the nation in both those categories. They are on pace for 192 tackles for loss and 108 sacks in the regular season. So, numbers unlikely to achieve because they're so high. But can Carolina do the same types of things that it did up front, make it really hard to run the ball, put pressure in the backfield, be disruptive, hit the quarterback? Can they do those things again? And then can you take a step forward with that really young secondary? I mean, the injury to DeAndre Boykins is a big injury. Not only do you lose a good player in Boykins, but Tayon Holloway, redshirt freshman, had never taken a snap at the college level before last year. Marcus Allen, I believe that was his 3rd career start, if not 4th, maybe. I mean, he hadn't started many games before the start last. So you've got a redshirt freshman and a true sophomore at your 2 corner spots, and you're down a little bit at the safety spot right now with some guys that you think are going to be able to contribute there that weren't able to play. So how can that secondary take some steps forward as well? Because Spencer Rattler was still 30 for 39, 340 yards. Now, I think he's one of the better quarterbacks the Heels will see this year, but he still put up those numbers despite all the sacks and hits. So can you build off what you did up front? Can you take a step forward on the back end?
When you're not surprising anybody anymore defensively, I think South Carolina was a little taken aback by what the Tar Heels were able to do.
Well, the fact that they took the opening, they won the coin toss and elected to take the kick,
right?
To me, that showed me that they were going to say, we're about to show you how we're going to blaze down the field, and it's going to be a long night for you.
Well, and we're going to start out up 7-0. We're just going to run right down the field, score a touchdown. You'll have to play from behind the rest of the day. Appalachian's been able to watch Carolina play on film. They've figured out, okay, have 2 guys on Kamen Rucker.
At all times.
Wherever he goes, even when he's on the sideline. And by the same token, they've identified possibly some weak areas that they want to try to exploit, which South Carolina didn't really have the benefit of doing that because there wasn't a lot of tape on some of those players that Jones just mentioned. So some of those young players are probably going to have to make some plays in this game. But also, in all fairness, I think you should feel like you have a physical advantage against Appalachian State. This is not the biggest, strongest, fastest team Carolina's going to play this year. And Carolina, in theory, should have more depth. So if it ends up being a warmer evening at Kenan Stadium by the 4th quarter, Carolina should be cycling through some depth and be able to use some fresh bodies in a way that perhaps the Mountaineers cannot. So Appalachian will have some advantages having seen some things they didn't know about. But Carolina also. So, yes, there's room for improvement on both sides of the ball.
Sure, of course.
When you say 16 tackles for loss, that actually happened. I mean, that's like the 40 points in the 4th quarter.
Yeah.
That is something that occurred in a Tar Heel football game that I never thought I'd see.
It's a hot number. It makes you go like, hey, 16 tackles for loss, what's up?
Even if it was just 14 in this game, I think I'd still be happy.
Tar Heels rotated 10 guys through that defensive front. Evans, Hester, Murphy, Rucker, Atkinson, Fox, Ritzy, Gaynor, Cowan, Shaw all played snaps in the game against South Carolina.
And as you say those names, you can think of at least one time when each of those names did something.
Yeah.
Like they weren't just out there occupying space. You can think of a play when, I remember when Javari Ritzy made that good play. They were contributing, and that's a positive sign.
One last thing, Tar Heels, and we talked about this earlier in the week, said they were committed to the run. They were committed to the run against South Carolina. Be interested to see how the Tar Heels build off of that in this particular game. British Brooks and Marion Hampton took a lion's share of the carries in the game against South Carolina. Both were effective. Brooks, he had nearly, our soon-to-be guest, had nearly 7 yards per carry. So how Carolina attacks things on the ground, worth keeping an eye on.